This review is going to be on the last day that I'm the owner of this thing figure. He's going off to his new home tomorrow, and I wanted to take a little bit of time to showcase exactly what I did with this thing and how I made it into what it is. This figure was difficult to make, and there's some good things and some bad things as far as I'm concerned on this. It was probably the most elaborate sculpting work that I've ever had to do. You can see that every single one of these spikes, front, back, upside down, legs, everything were sculpted by hand. This was the most labor-intensive, time-consuming project I've ever done as a custom figure, and it was challenging as an artist to actually complete it. For that, I am grateful to have done it because it has changed my perspective on a lot of things as far as how I do custom figures and how I will do custom figures in the future. That said, I will never make this figure again. It was intense to do and difficult to do. This thing is heavy, and this is an entire container of Abe's Fix-It sculpt and regular sculpt. So I have essentially two containers of sculpt into this figure alone. This figure, a lot of people have been asking when they've seen pictures of it picked up by a couple media articles online, and just on my own page and some of the groups, making comments about like, what's up with the thing? Why does he look like that? Because that's what he looked like in the series in the early 90s around Fantastic Four number 310. And then moving forward in that series into the 350s before he went back to the normal version of the thing that we normally see. The concept, I guess, at the time was that he got exposed to more cosmic radiation, further mutated, and looked like this. Every one of these spikes was sculpted individually, and it was difficult. So what I would pretty much do, I have a separate sculpting video on here, so check out the other sculpting video about how I did it. It's kind of like a work in progress type thing. I was pretty much taking sculpt once it was ready to go, and I would only be able to do a section at a time because I needed it to cure, to be able to build up and work on it. I would be taking like a small piece of sculpt and then making it into a wedge, into like almost like a pyramid or a triangle spike shape, and then adhering it on there. So there's basically underneath of all of these spikes in different sections are base plates of sculpt. They're flat against the initial figure, and they serve as an anchor for each of these spikes. The spikes would then be stuck onto the individual plates, and then was actually glued down. There's a lot of glue in between too, so everything is stuck together and won't break off. They're wedged together now. That said, the sculpt looks great as far as I'm concerned. There's a ton of detail in here. You can see every single one of these things is detailed. I had to do it as I was going too, which slowed everything down significantly. So I mean, I would spend like an hour or two sometimes just sculpting straightforward, but I would lose so much time in doing any other section. So I mean, like, I would do a day where I would just do a portion of the chest, and it would just be this front section from here to here. And then the next day I would do like the upper arm on one side, and then the upper arm on another side, and then the lower arms, and then the hands, so on, moving through the bottom of the figure. And then the back, the head was challenging just to get it to look right. So it was hard. So obviously the base figure is the normal Ben Grimm thing figure that just came out in that Doctor Doom wave. I forget who the Build-A-Figure was. It was the one with Doctor Doom and all of the Fantastic Four and the gray She-Hulk. I used that because it was easy and common to get, and it was a $20 figure. This thing's a ton of sculpting, like I said. I would put each spike on there, and then I would have to depress and make individual indentations and sculpting details in each one of the spikes. So each spike there's not one that's smooth. I mean, every one has spikes. I know someone else that's making one of these. I'm not going to say who, because I kind of want to see when they reveal it, how much different theirs looks versus mine. They're trying for a very symmetrical look. Great artist, absolute inspiration to some of the stuff I do, but our art styles are totally different. his will look way more clean than mine will. I don't like clean figures. I don't like the term, yeah, that looks factory. That's kind of insulting as an artist to me. I don't want things to look factory. I want things to look better than factory, and I want things to look like they are lived in. I believe in that George Lucas lived in universe theory, where things aren't pristine and things aren't supposed to look like they just came off the assembly line. Things are supposed to look like they have some wear and tear, some battle damage and stuff. So when I did this, it was a ton of paint, ton of stuff there. The shorts were the only thing that really stayed intact. And when I say stayed intact, like they were clearly painted. But as far as the sculpting, they stayed the same. And people would be like, well, how come he's all smooth in that area? It's like, hey, Brody from Mallrats, calm down. He's smooth in the shorts area because that's how he was depicted in the comics. I wanted to make a comic accurate figure from that era. So yeah, I understand that he would obviously have some spikes and stuff going on in the shorts and the upper legs too, and how weird that is, but that's what the design is. Trying to basically take a 2D image and translate it to a 3D image. I wasn't even going to do little bumps or anything like that makes it look anything weirder than what it looked like on the 2D page by the artist in that Fantastic Four era back then. So that's why everything's smooth. But clearly it was painted. The paints were difficult. I'm going to play with the lighting to try to see if I can show you some of the light detail, the paint detail. So this whole thing was painted with like one base layer. Everything was pretty much, everything was white initially. It was white primer on this thing, so everything would pop a little bit better. And then what I did is I went with a base layer. Then I dry brushed a lighter, brighter orange over top of the base layer on everything. So I'm just dry brushing all of it to try to bring out some of the detail. And after I did the dry brushing, I did two things. I did a black wash, and you can see the details pop because of the wash. The darker paint is in there. But the other thing I did too is I did a red ink wash, which I've never done before. The orange was too light for me. It was just too light. It didn't look exactly the way I wanted it to look. So when it didn't look the way I wanted it to look, I'm like, how do I fix this without repainting the entire thing? So I used a red ink acrylic base paint, and the red pretty much acted as a stain, similar to deck staining if you've done home improvement, where it seeped into the actual sculpt work itself and into the paint that was already on there, and just kind of stained it into a darker orange at that point, and it was perfect for what I was looking for. So that gave me a little bit of confidence to play around with more of these inks that are out there, to be able to work on some regular standard figures versus some bulky, huge painted figure like this. So almost kind of, I guess stain would probably be more appropriate than dye. It didn't really dye the figure, it stained it because I was putting it in certain spots and locations specifically, and putting more or less in others. So that's why you wind up with a lot of the shadow detailing that's in there. Let's try to get this thing to work so you can see. I mean, you can see some of the shadow details that are in there. That if you look at under the spikes, it's darker in there, and that's not just because of the shadows. It's because the paint, the wash is deeper and darker in the crevices, versus out here where the dry brushing put the brighter color on. So yeah, I mean, it was just a ton of sculpts. I mean, everything is sculpted. The only parts you can see that were like the original are like maybe the bottoms of the feet. I mean, that's really it. That's the only part of the original figure that you see exposed, and part of the face. But the majority of it is just completely redone. I lost a lot of articulation. So he's still articulated, just not nearly as much as he was before. I mean, here's the problem with this figure, specifically this figure. If you do this figure at all, you can't lift his arms up, and you can't do stuff because of the way that the arm socket is. If I lift this figure's arm up, I'm going to break off all of these sculpted details. So I lost articulation. Even these, there's still contact points where this stuff rubs, and you kind of got to play around it and be careful not to break off any of the spikes or rub the paint off in any of those areas either. So they pulled out a little bit. I made it so it pulled out a little tiny bit, so that you can move it around a little bit. So you can make some cool punching poses. He still has articulation at the waist, so you can still make poses. You can still pose this figure. The legs still bend. They're a little more difficult, but the legs still bend, just not as much, because again, you're hindered by the sculpt. That's everything. So you can see there's a contact point right here where the two pieces are meeting. So you're losing a lot of stuff. So it just doesn't work nearly as much. I still have the legs being able to articulate outward at the thigh. So they still move. The thighs still move. The waist still moves. The elbows still bend. They're just not as much. So there's still some posing you can get done with this figure. It's just not anything like it was, just because it can't be. It can't be. And realistically, I mean, this thing, I know where this thing's going. It's going to a friend who has a ton of custom artwork pieces already in his collection. So this is actually a companion piece for the Sharon Ventura Miss Marvel figure that Chris Serta did. And this is basically the same exact era, same exact artwork, same exact Fantastic Four fan. So I'll be happy to send this off to him. So it completes his, well, I guess it won't complete, but definitely goes to his Ben Grimm collection. The only other thing I did is I repainted this from the opposite colors, because what was it before? It was like a black and blue, like different colors on the outside and all that. So I just repainted all of that with the dark blue and then the white striping. So it matched the, I guess the negative zone uniforms from that time frame in the comics. And then I dry brushed a lighter blue over top of it. So it brought out some of those. You can kind of see it there. I mean, if you look at your thing figure, it probably isn't highlighting some of these wrinkles and these details. This figure definitely has details that are popping just because of the dry brushing and stuff that are on here. This was all hand painted. I didn't use an airbrush for any of this because I just didn't want to screw it up, and I'm not that great with it. So that made it even more maddening to do. We lost the articulation completely in here. It just does. We got a wobble. That's all we got. The head's still fine. Head moves. But so I'm happy and I'm satisfied with it. It was the most aggravating, challenging piece of artwork that I've ever made. I will never do it again. But it has inspired me to do bigger and better things than simple repaints and battle damaged figures and things that I've loved doing in the past. It's never going to be the same again. It's always going to have to be a one-up on this one. I have taken my time. I've got to that idea. If anyone's actually watching this, that I'm mentioning, I appreciate you guys and what you do to inspire me to be a better artist. So, I'll name a couple names, and please don't take offense if I don't say your name. I'm just thinking of people that have pushed me. Definitely, Loose Collector, Craig Warwick. I sit back and I watch Warwick's stuff, and I'm always impressed and always in awe. And I'm at that point now where I think Craig is, where I don't want to make things that you will ever buy in a store, and I don't care that I'm making something for a customer or not. He doesn't sell any of his stuff. I'm making stuff that is for me, for art. So if it takes me 6 months to make a figure that I feel satisfied with, like this did. I did this all during the COVID stuff where everything was in lockdown, and it took me months to make. I think it took me 3 months to make this thing in my free time. I would much rather spend 3 months making something this nice, in my opinion, versus repainting something and making, I don't know, my 20th Gambit. So and that philosophy change came from watching Craig do his figures, and how little he puts out and makes as far as quantity, but how those few products that he actually does, those few art pieces, are all about quality, and that's always impressed me. Um, I said Loose Collector already. Dave does an amazing job on that stuff. Christina Cruz does an amazing job with her figures. She's always been cutting edge and stuff as far as design, and as far as using products that have been newer and getting and mastering them. And her paints are amazing. So especially on the female figures with the hair and with the makeup stuff. I know nothing about makeup or hair or any of that stuff because honestly I'm a guy, and it's something I've ever paid attention to. So her work impresses the hell out of me, that she knows how to highlight a face the way that she does. Yeah, so that I'm trying to think who else would be people I would name that be able to look at their stuff. Mike, I would say look at Mike's stuff from Phoenix Force Customs. Um, Amazing stuff. I mean, there's so many people to be able to look at to say these are the people that push me in the direction that to do this stuff as art versus do this stuff as something I'm putting on eBay. This is not going to eBay, and this is not being sold. This is being gifted. This piece is pure art. This wasn't about money. I'm sure I could have made a pretty penny on this thing, but this was a philosophy change and a mindset change, and I'm happy to have made this the way that it is. So I'm glad he's going to the right home, and hopefully you'll see some more pictures of him online once he gets there with the companion piece that is already there. So thanks for checking this out. Thanks for looking. If you have questions about how this thing was made or sculpted that I haven't covered in the work in progress video or the or this video, feel free to ask. This is one of those few figures I honestly feel pretty confident with. I always worry, but like if I use the first design, or as everyone calls it, the recipe, I'm always worried like somebody's gonna rip off my recipe and never gonna give me credit for it, and never people are just gonna crank them out and just use them as ways to rake in money on eBay and making there's no way you're going to do that with this figure. You have to have some level of skill to be able to do this, and no one is going to sit there and assembly line these things with the amount of aggravation that this figure causes a person. Just everything from the fact that these things are so heavy. I mean, I would seriously leave the room while things are supposed to be curing, and if I didn't lay this figure a certain way, the spikes, because they're so heavy, gravity would be pulling them in certain ways, and I'd be getting a droop effect. So, it was one of those things where I pretty much had to be around and working on another figure at the same time this thing was curing, just to make it actually work. So if you're going to remake this figure and use the recipe for it, good luck. It's going to be a pain. It's not going to be something you're going to want to endeavor on, and it is not something that's going to be fun, I assure you. But this one's a blood, sweat, and tears project. Thanks for checking it out.